Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. All right, so again, welcome to the screenings workshop. So this is the second part of the series of the 2 workshops. So we're going to go over again. It might be a little bit repetitive if you came to the first workshop, but we're going to go more in depth on the tier 1 and tier 2 differences, as well as how to prepare for each of those, depending on what you choose. And then after that, this probably the most important part is important dates. And we're going to go over the calendar for how the rest of the semester is going to go. And then there's also like a couple notes I want to mention that are going to be different from what we've done before. Specifically, when you go in to submit your film through the SOFA2 portal, there's going to be something different, and we'll go over that when we get there. So to start, I just want to mention that all of the information that I'm going to be talking about is already found on our website, either on the documentation or the screenings tab. And you can always reach us at our email, FVASA@rit.edu. So by now, you should be in, well, hopefully you should be in your post-production process for your film. And you would also need to quality check, depending on if you're doing tier 1 and tier 2, that will look a little different, but at the end of the day, you're going to submit through SOFATube. And these are some helpful handouts that are also in our website. So there's a screenings checklist, which is kind of like a quick way to make sure you've done all the steps and done everything that you need to do to be ready for screenings. And then the other handout is submission and QC policies. So in this handout, there will be an updated calendar of what the semester is going to look like, and then some QC policies, depending on tier 1 or tier 2, that are also helpful to just have on hand. So just an overview, both tier 1 and tier 2 films must include closed captions. You will also include the SOFA bumper at the head of the film, just like any semester. And then they also must adhere to the same audio loudness specifications. And we can get to the part where I mentioned how to check what your audio loudness is and how to check if it meets the specifications. So we'll start with tier 1. Again, it's a pretty simple process. You must export your film in the correct format. For tier 1, this is going to be an H.264 MP4 video file. And this you can QC on your own computer. You don't have to go sign up to QC in Wegmans or anything. And then just submit your film through the screenings portal on SOFATube. And we'll get to this part when I say pass the FVASA auto QC. And then at the end, sign up for a screening time on the deadline day, which is going to be April 25th from 7 to 10 p.m. So here is the tier 1 requirements. Again, it's a 1920 by 1080 video. This is the fixed aspect ratio, 16 by 9. You can have any of the common frame rates. Just make sure it's progressive, not interlaced. For sound, you are limited to having stereo only sound. If you want to do surround sound, you'd have to do a tier 2 DCP. And then compression, as I mentioned before, use the H.264 codec in an MP4 container. And then these are just some other specifications that, the color space and the sampling, but all of this is already in a template on the lab machines. So you don't have to worry about changing any settings since there's already like a preset selected for you. Just make sure that if you're doing tier 1, just select the tier 1 preset, either in Premiere or whatever editing software you're working with. And all these settings will be already set up for you. And then when you export, please make sure to watch your film the entire way. Just as a backup. You don't want to miss any little detail and then have to re-export all over again. And as I mentioned before, there's presets already installed on both SOFA and the Magic Lab machines that contain all of these correct export settings. So we just have to check the preset when you go export, and then it'll be already done. And as I mentioned before, the audio loudness is one of the most important specifications to really make sure you follow. And these are -3 for the max peak. And then for your integrated loudness levels, you must adhere to -27 LKFS. And then we do have a ±2 on that. So if it's -26, it's fine. If it's -28, 29, it's fine. But just make sure that it's not like -40 or something like that. And then we do have some documentation on how to check this on whatever program you're using. So for Pro Tools, we suggest Isotope Insight, and then Isotope Loudness Control. And then for Premiere Pro, there is the loudness radar that you can use to check those. And how to do this, like step-by-step instructions, are also on our YouTube channel, as well as the documentation that I mentioned before. And then for quality control for tier 1, again, you don't have to go in Wegmans and sign up for a spot. You can just do it on your own computer. Check those sound levels, check your content, and then just check the encoding when you go export. And then when you want to submit your tier 1 film, you submit through SofaTube, the screenings portal. The wizard is pretty easy to follow. It asks for your name, your major, and stuff like that. And after you go through all those steps, you get a ticket, and then that ticket you'll have to show us when you go to sign up for your screening spot. And then make sure that your film is labeled last name, film name, and then the date, because it's super important, because some people don't follow this, and then we don't know whose film it is, and we don't want you to run into that problem. So just make sure to follow the naming convention when you go submit your file. And then this is new. This semester, we have a kind of pre-flight check when you are going through the SofaTube sign up process. So at the end, when you go to select what kind of file you want to upload to the server, there's going to be like this box that appears, and it checks your audio loudness, your resolution, and your codec. And then if you see check marks on everything, that means you're all set. But if you see there's an X on it, it means that something is wrong, and we need to go back and re-export and fix that before you upload. So this will be very helpful to pay attention to, because it would actually tell you before you actually submit that something about your file does not meet the requirements. So now we can talk about tier 2, the more complicated one. I guess before I go into tier 2, is there any questions on tier 1 stuff? Okay, so tier 2, you will also know this as, I guess, the DCP way to submit. But we'll go over how to, create your DCP. What do you need to do that? And then for tier 2, we also ask you that you submit a trim video, which is just like an MP4 format of your DCP. And this is only because we want you to still have a copy to archive to SofaTube, and SofaTube doesn't support uploading a DCP. So we just want to make sure that you have an MP4 file, same as tier 1, but just for archival purposes. And then for tier 2, you do have to sign up for a spot if you want to QC your film in the Wegmans Theater, since you can't really use your laptop to play back a DCP. Make sure that before you actually sign up for a QC, though, that you submit your DCP and then sign up for a QC. And then after you QC and you're happy with it, or you fix it and then you're happy with it, then you come sign up for a screenings time April 25th, just like everyone else. So tier 2, you get a little bit more like options on either your aspect ratio and your resolution. So we have basically 4. We have the 2K flat, the 2K scope, and then you have a 4K flat and a 4K scope. And it really depends on what you chose at the beginning of when you start to make your film. So it shouldn't change too much at the end. Just make sure that you know what you're choosing before you go and export things. For frame rate, you can only do 24 according to DCI standards. So when you go to export and you shot in like 29.97 or something, just make sure that you do export at 24 frames. And then for sound, you can still do stereo, but most people take advantage of the fact that you can do surround sound like 5.1 or 7.1. And then again, your format is going to be a DCP, a digital cinema package. And then you also have to submit that video trim file, which is just an MP4 version of that. So how do we go about creating the DCP? Well, first you need what is called the digital source master, or the DCM. And these are kind of like the ingredients you use to make your DCP. And there's one for your picture, which is just like your images, and another one for your sound. So this is like the final product after you've made all your edits, all your color grading, and you have it, you have what you want. That is called your digital source master. So we use a program called DCP-O-Matic that actually packages the DCP for you. So you take both your picture DCM and your audio DSM, and then you upload them to DCP-O-Matic, and it actually just does all the work for you and packages into a folder, a collection of files called a DCP. Again, please watch your film before you export your DSMs. And you export picture and audio separately, but please make sure that they are synchronized. The audio can't be like longer. The audio file can't be longer than your picture file. Otherwise, DCP-O-Matic won't package it correctly. So just make sure that they are the exact same length. And you have 2 options to export. You have the TIFF option, and then you have the DNxHR version. The TIFF actually is an image sequence, so it makes an image for every single frame you have in your film. It is uncompressed, which gives you the highest quality, but it's very large. So if you have like a 10-minute film, it might take you, I don't even know if you could, but it might take you like more than 12 or 24 hours to export if you do that. That's why we recommend, if you have like a live action film that's like 15 minutes, just do DNxHR, which is a little bit more compressed, but it still gives you that high quality image compared to, just doing like a tier 1 version of it. It'll just take way less time and you'll be way less stressed if it actually, exports correctly. And then for exporting, we also have presets that, again, are on all the SOFA and Magic Lab machines. And if they're not there, which they should be there, but if you're doing it on your own machine, there is the presets as a file on our website. And then after you export your DSMs, you combine and package them in the program called DCP-O-Matic. There's a step-by-step documentation located in our website. And then it also has templates for use in DCP-O-Matic based on which format you use for tier 2, whether it's like you have a scope film or a flat film, 2K, 4K, there's templates for those as well. And then when you complete that and you have your DCP packaged, then it automatically gets sent to FVASA if you export from the lab machines. So I would highly recommend using DCP-O-Matic on the lab machines and building your DCP there. And then as always, just try to keep a copy for yourself just in case something goes wrong and we don't get it, or it gets corrupted for some reason. It's always just good to have a backup. So again, you must have a trim file to accompany your DCP because it doesn't work on sofa tubes. You can use the same DSMs to create your trim file. You can just combine them in a timeline, for example, in Premiere, and then you can just use the tier 1 presets for exporting that, and then you'd be done with that. For QC, once you submit your DCP through DCP-O-Matic, we have it, and then you can use the sign-up sheet located on our website, and I think we also sent an email about that for signing up for a QC spot. And then if your QC passes, you're all set since you've already submitted your DCP. Just make sure you do submit that trim file and sign up for our screening times on April 25th. But if you find out that if it fails and it's before the submission deadline, just be sure to fix and resubmit it. If there is time and there's availability, we do allow you to have a second QC, if time allows it and it's early enough in the process. And then, you can verify your changes and make sure you're happy with it before submitting again. And then I just wanted to reiterate some additional notes. Again, captioning is required for all films, no matter if you do tier 1 or tier 2. We have some captioning tutorials on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. And for captioning, you will need open captions, which are burned into the image because we don't have a workflow for closed captions yet, but hopefully that'll be happening maybe in the future. And if there's this thing called the amnesty deadline, if you weren't aware, but I will go over what that means if you haven't heard of it before. And this semester, the amnesty deadline is April 20th at 10 p.m. So what this means is any student who submits before this date will be afforded a guaranteed QC assessment and will be fully supported by us to correct any technical issues that we might discover. And especially if you're a graduating senior and you submit before this deadline and we find that there's something wrong with your film at any point in the process, you won't need to forfeit your screenings time while these corrections are made, because graduating seniors do get priority when signing up for screenings time. They can do it anytime the week prior to when screening starts. And then films submitted after this deadline, but before the general submission deadline of April 25th. And we find that there's some technical flaws by the filmmaker. They can still be corrected, but they won't be allowed to keep their original screenings time if they're graduating seniors. So that's a difference. And then more significantly, if you submit your film after this deadline and after the general submission deadline, and there's technical flaws, this is probably the worst thing you can do, but there's a risk of your film not being screened at all, and there's going to be bigger problems because you didn't submit by the final deadline. So please make sure that you are working on your film as early as possible and you're being aware of your time in doing so. Artist statements, if you're a BFA student, you know that you have to have an artist statement if you're doing a capstone. And we do allow you to have a pre-recorded artist statement, or if you want to do it live when you're there, you can. The artist statements will be approximately 5 minutes. And the deadline, if you are doing a pre-recorded artist statement, the deadline for submitting these is the same as the general screenings deadline, which is April 25th at 10 p.m. So it's really up to you whether you want to do pre-recorded and have a tighter deadline, or if you want to allow yourself more time to think about what you're going to say and then just say it in person. Craft presentations. So craft capstone students may schedule a screenings time prior to, you know, uploading your media for your presentations, since your time slots are kind of connected to the capstone film that you worked on. It'll be a little awkward if you have your presentation before the capstone film that you worked on screened, since, you know, there's like behind the scenes things. And then capstone directors, as I mentioned before, like graduating students, are given priority to select times up until noon on deadline day. So the week before deadline, if you're a graduating senior, you can email us to reserve a time for your screenings. But craft students from noon until 7 p.m. on deadline day can select their preferred presentation time, just so they know when their director, you know, is screening, so they can have a time that's after their film has screened. And then students are responsible for uploading like any media they have for their presentation to the screening server, which is where all the films go. And we ask that you upload this no less than 24 hours prior to your screenings time, just so we have the files on hand and ready. We don't want to do anything last minute. And here is a calendar of what the rest of the semester is going to look like for screenings. Submissions, SofaTube opens for submissions on Monday, April 11th. So right away, you can, if you have your film, you can start submitting it by as soon as April 11th. And then, as I mentioned before, the amnesty deadline ends April 20th, which is the following Wednesday at 10 p.m. And then sign up starts on April 25th at 7 to 10 p.m. And that is also the submission deadline for all films. All films must be submitted by April 25th at 10 p.m. And then screenings will start on April 28th at 10 a.m. and will go for 4 or 5 days, depending on the number of films that we get. And again, here is the links to where you can find all of this information, documentation, as well as the calendar that I just showed is also on our website. And any questions? I think I saw this.
There's one in the chat, yeah.
Can you read? I can't even access the chat anymore. Like, I don't know where it went.
So if they submit by the the amnesty deadline, how soon is the turnaround for our QC, our guaranteed QC?
That is a good question. We would probably do it as soon as possible. I think like 24 hours would be good. Depending on how many films actually submit by the amnesty deadline. But I would assume that no more than 24 hours. Let's stop sharing.
And then for the artist statements, if they're pre-recorded, do they screen them like a film, or how are we going to do that this semester?
If they're pre-recorded, we just have them after your film is screened. So they'll just go after. And then after your artist statement will be your Q&A, and then you'd go up and take critiques. Artist statements are not required for sophomore films. They're only for capstones, so like graduating seniors and MFAs. For TIFF, a 3-4 minute film. So it depends. I think if you're live action, 3 to 4 minute film will take longer than if you're animation. But if you are animation, for TIFF, I would expect about 5 to 6 hours, a little bit less. It also depends on like what computer you're working on and what the power of that is. So it's a little rough to estimate, but it does take a pretty long time. So just be sure that you're ready for that and prepared to just wait. Or you could just leave it processing and then go do something else and then come back. Are there tutorials about how to set up After Effects and Premiere presets on the FVASA YouTube channel? There are no tutorials on how to do that, but if you find that you need help, like applying a preset, just like email us and we'll help you. But all of the presets are already on all the SOFA and the Magic Lab machines. So you can do those there, but you can also Google how to put a preset, like upload a preset file on Premiere. But if you are having trouble, just like email us and we'll help you.
There are instructions on the website as well, directly under the presets or somewhere around there. Basically, you just have to copy some files into a particular folder and then they will show up in Adobe. But if you're using one of the machines, they should already be on there.
Thank you, Andrew. Can a film be resubmitted before the general deadline? Yes. You can resubmit your film as long as it's before the general deadline. Just make sure you don't like have like 5 resubmissions or something like that. Like 1 resubmission is fine. If you find that something is wrong with the film you submitted, it's totally okay to go and fix it, but just be sure that, you know, you want to make sure that the films you are submitting is what you think is the final version. Is there any content guidelines for artist statements? That you can look in the SOFA handbook, or you could ask your professor that you have. I don't know off the top of my head what those requirements are, but they are listed in the SOFA handbook. If you Google like RIT SOFA handbook, those will be there, or ask your professor. Any last questions on anything? If an animated film is 1920 by 1080, would we have to re-render for a DCP? Assuming, are you asking if you already like exported?
Yeah, I'm saying like if not exported from like Premiere, but from like Maya or something like that.
I think you would just have to pillar box your aspect ratio, and you can do that in Premiere. So I don't think you'd have to re-render. You just have to make sure that before you do export from Premiere that you add like pillar boxing. And you'd probably want to do a flat if you want to do a DCP, which is the closest aspect ratio to the 1920 by 1080. I think it's 1998 by 1080. So it's just a little wider. But yeah, just add like the pillar boxes or pillar bars. I don't know what they're called.
What format would you be exporting out of Maya?
Like 1920 by 1080, and it's just an image sequence.
Like a PNG sequence or something?
Yeah,
or
EXR.
TIFF. EXR, okay. Then yeah, I would just say throw the EXR into either Resolve or Premiere and just use the presets. And like Andrea said, just add those black bars on the side. Unless you can do that right out of Maya and just like change your base canvas, then you'll kind of save yourself some time. But usually it's easier just to do it the other way.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So as a capstone student doing a craft presentation, my presentation doesn't have to be in by the 25th. No, it doesn't. because you'd have that priority time, from noon to 7 on deadline day, which is the 25th, and you'd sign up for a screenings time. So, and then, as I mentioned before, we do ask you that you submit it before 24 hour, or like by the 24-hour mark before your sign up, so that we do have that file. But it doesn't have to be in by the 25th, so it doesn't really count like as a film. Where would you find the presets in After Effects and Premiere on the lab computers? So they would, when you go in Premiere, I've used Premiere as an example, or like Media Encoder, when you do like, the export window, there will be a little like slide down bar. It's kind of hard to explain since I don't have it in front of me, but there will be, when you select, there will be a box for like presets, and then there'll be like a slide down option, and then those presets will be in there. If you have any more questions, I would email us if you have like trouble finding those, because I could just like send you a screenshot of what it would look like and not try to explain it now. I don't even have Premiere on my laptop, so like I can't even show you right now. But if you do have questions on where to access those or can't find them, just like email us, and then I could just like send you a screenshot. Is DCP required for capstone? No, DCP is completely up to you. We do recommend DCP for capstones, because it's like a much higher quality way to present your film, especially since we do have the Wegmans Theater, which is essentially like a movie theater, and it meets all those specifications, and it kind of helps you learn how films are actually packaged in the industry today and how they are sent to movie theaters. They only accept DCPs in movie theaters, so it's kind of just a learning experience for you, but it's completely optional. You don't have to do it if you're a capstone. Screening signups is going to be April 25th from 7 to 10 p.m. And then that 10 p.m. is also the general submission deadline. So all your films have to be submitted by April 25th, 10 p.m. Should sophomore films be submitted as tier 1 or tier 2? So again, it is completely up to you whether you want to choose tier 1 or tier 2. Kind of like what your vision is what you want it to be. If you want to do surround sound, you do have to do tier 2. If you're fine with having stereo and you want a 16:9 aspect ratio, you can just go ahead and do tier 1. It's entirely up to you. So for screening signups, there's basically two things. If you are a graduating senior and you have a capstone, you can sign up the week before the general submission deadline by emailing us. If you're anyone else who is not a graduating senior who has a capstone, you will have to come in person starting at 7 on April 25th, and we'll be in the Gannett lobby. So where our office is, where the cage is, and we'll be there, and you'll have to have your receipt from SofaTube and present it to us, and then you can sign up in person for a screenings time. Yes, Simon, a DCP can take either 5.1 or 7.1. Screenings usually go from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., but it also depends on, you know, how long the films run. It's about an estimate. It usually runs a little bit later past 8 p.m. But we try to keep it from 10 to 8 for all days. For MPS capstone presentations, what is the sign-up policy? So since you're not really screening a film, you don't have to sign up through SofaTube, I don't think. And also there's like 6 of us in MPS graduating. So I'm pretty sure we can coordinate that with Ricky and David separately. And then there'll be like a capstone day, like an MPS capstone day where we, you know, share our presentations and all that. So that would be kind of separate from all the SofaTube stuff, since it's not a film. Any other questions? These are great questions, by the way. All right, if there is no more questions, there's one question. Is there any way to know what kind of color space we should edit with? That depends on if you want to do a tier 1 or tier 2. A tier 1 would be just 709 sRGB color space. For tier 2, you do have a bit more leeway in what you can choose, but you know, if you want to shoot in 2020, you can. But it really depends on what your film, like what you want your film to be as tier 1 or tier 2. Yeah, and then Simon said you can do the P3 color space for a DCP. But assuming you're tier 1, you don't really need to worry about color space at all. Yeah, just do Rec 709. And because it wouldn't be able to support anything other than Rec 709 if you're doing tier 1. So just do Rec 709. Okay, I don't think there is more questions. So again, if you do have questions that come up later after this, just email us, FVASA@rt.edu. And good luck with all your films and your progress. And yeah, thank you all for coming and have a great night.
Thank you too.
I'm still recording.